Howdy, Joe Straczynski here again. And we're off to do a commentary on the last of our 3 big episodes for this season, although there are more coming later on this season, but these are the ones that are sort of the most arc-changing stories in the entire season that we're looking at now. Before we begin, one quick, I guess sort of kind of apology or just an explanation, I suppose. This requires some background, so bear with me for just a moment here. Growing up in the early Cretaceous period, when I was a kid, I was in a very dysfunctional, abusive, violent family. It was, those of you who read my autobiography kind of know offhand already how horrific it was. And one of the things that I learned early on was my opinion was not welcome. I was encouraged either to shut up, or if I spoke up at the wrong time, I would get decked, which is one reason why I became very quiet and very shy for most of my life. But also, it became a psychological thing as well, because it got pretty awful at times. I mean, I don't know if you can see it or not, but on this hand, there is a round spot just right around here. And what that's from was when my father burned me with a cigarette. I had done something to annoy him, and he said, by burning here, where it always be in my line of vision, I would always remember what I had done to piss him off. The irony being, I don't remember what that was. I remember only the cigarette. So that was the kind of, and what happens after a while of that, at least for me, I developed a combination of a stutter, a stammer, and a slur. So even when I did talk, no one could understand a word I said, which is another reason why I was very quiet around other people growing up, because I couldn't talk very well. I couldn't communicate. It's, something you have to adjust to. And it wasn't until really I got into college that I learned how to sort of control this by taking speech classes and one theater class and learning how to communicate effectively. What you're hearing from me now, I could not have done when I was younger. It was simply impossible for me to even have this conversation, and the idea of it would have terrified me to the point where I would have hidden in my room and not come out for 3 or 4 years. It is something I'm still dealing with to this day, to varying degrees. And I found that when I get tired, I've been talking for a long time, controlling how I speak to be comprehensible. I began to get fatigued, and my control over all this starts to go down a little bit. So, as some of you have noted in DMs, when I start these conversations and these critiques and these commentaries, I always start good and loud and very reasonably clear for being me. But about halfway through, a little thereafter, it becomes a little bit harder to understand what I'm saying. And that's the reason why I run out of steam after a while of controlling all of this nonsense to be able to be understood. So I will definitely work on improving that in future videos. I'm just not used to talking for an hour straight about almost anything. Even on panels, when I do conventions, there's often a break. I'm answering questions. I show a video, so I can then gear up my energy level to come back and be able to communicate full throttle. But that isn't the case here. I tend to try and go whatever I can straight through. So again, my apologies if that gets kind of in the way at times. It's just something that I will continue to work on my whole life, basically. I figure I'll finally hit a point where I am absolutely crystal clear in a majorly like Tom Cruise kind of way, where I can communicate, or Ian McKellen, I can be big and communicative and bold, and then I will be hit by a meteor and die. So that I figured what's waiting for me. So with that preamble done, let us now turn to the episode. This is again a sync-up commentary. So those of you at home should have This playing perhaps audio on your phone, and then at home you can call up your neighbors and annoy them, or you can call up the episode on HBO Max or on a DVD or a semaphore. That's often a very good way of communicating these things. And hit play when I hit play at the first frame, and we will watch it together. As before, I'm turning down the volume completely so that I won't get flagged by YouTube watching subtitles. So there should be no other music or sound to interfere with listening to the audio of this as you're watching the show. So that said, we'll save everything else for the show itself. We are hitting play in 3, 2, 1, now. This was probably the single biggest episode we had ever done of this show. The average TV show has maybe 70, 80 shots in it. This had, I believe I'm correct, like 140 shots, of which there were something like 400 effect shots. I made the error of attributing that to a prior episode. I was incorrect. Close to 400 effect shots. What happens? You can say exterior, battle. The Star Furies unload on the Earth destroyers, but to do that, you need to create 4, 5, or 6 effect shots to that one scene. So when everyone read it, they thought, this is great. We can never make it, but this is terrific. I said, no, we're going to make it. We're just going to shoot this very early in the process and take our time. And as it was, we barely made it. We did the mix, the final audio mix on this, with some effect shots still missing a few days before we had to deliver it. And poor George Johnson, our co-producer in charge of production, literally had to run this thing in his car to the Digibeta version, to a place where they could beam it into the P10, whatever that system was that they use, 3 hours before broadcast. So it was really tight. And consequently, there are some glitches here and there that have never been fixed because we just couldn't get around to it, usually in terms of the names of the Earth destroyers. I try to ignore those and just focus on everything else. But it was a monstrous undertaking, particularly because one thing we wanted to do is always important to me and to line producer John Copeland, was that we always wanted to see a strategy behind the battles. It's not just two ships slugging it out somewhere. It is, you can see, okay, these ships are coming in first, they're making a hole for the ones coming after them, here's where the landing vessels are, and everything has to make sense strategically and logistically. And every battle sequence we ever did for the show, but particularly in this episode, was very carefully choreographed so that we can follow exactly what's going on. And that's ridiculously tough to do. But we pulled it off here, and I'm very happy with what we got back as a consequence. This opening sequence really is meant to highlight the very personal nature of this war. In most of the episode, we are fighting against alien forces or killers or what have you, but this is a civil war, and civil war is family against family. One well-known ship against another well-known ship from the same military force. As he says here, we know everyone we kill. And that's a really hard dynamic to survive, and a really hard but also compelling dynamic to explore as a writer. I'm a big buff of history, and I like reading about the Civil War. There are elements, I think, from, for instance, Glory, that you can see in this episode. Here's the heartfelt parts of it, and the strategy of it, and the pain of fighting someone who lives just down the road from you. This is, as I mentioned in a prior commentary, this is the episode that I knew would be the one that turns everything around for the course of the show, the one we've been building toward for 2.5 years. The one where we say, no, it's not going to be the same anymore. Everything is about to change in a big way. So, yeah, this was, I just kept thinking if I could just hold on, keep the show together until we hit the Severed Dreams trilogy, we'll be okay. It's worth pointing out, in the course of this episode, Jerry actually broke his right arm and his right wrist in a fall, and I'll point it out when it happens. The irony, of course, being that in my script I had attributed to him a broken leg and ended up with him with a broken arm instead. But the thing about it, Jerry didn't want to leave. Jerry had 2 more shots to do in that sequence, and he was determined to stay there. This is, I mentioned this in prior episodes for this particular trilogy, but here, even though they're 3 hours away from trouble, they're still thinking that there is some way out of this. There's some way that they can get away with it. And, all the strategizing, we'll put a cut-off system in the comm system, shut everything down. These are all stalling techniques. These are all ways to buy more time. But there comes a point when there is no more time. Where he says here, how far this goes we'll have to see. He still hasn't committed. This is a man who has always been loyal to Earth Force. And he can't, even at this point, see himself turning against that organization. He's still negotiating. How far this goes, we'll see. What happens to that, what happens to that. But there always comes a time when there is no more, as I mentioned, no more time. Mira mentions here that the Narns are in charge of security, and that's the opening scene with Londo and the Narn is just one of my favorites because of the joy the Narn was taking in holding him back. Here Jakar's picking up a dummy, actually. If you look at the hand, you can tell that this is actually a very lightweight dummy that he's carrying off. It's been very interesting seeing how much of our show is playing out in real life, and seeing later on ISN going down, and someone protesting that on the air. We just saw that happening in Russia with the whole Ukraine situation. David Eagle shot this episode. He was the director on this. And what I liked about it is that very often places like Control and Command and others are a bit overlit. And he was able to really bring some shadows into the scene. And that just adds a nice texture. It also makes it a little more ominous. And I like here that Sheridan takes the moment to make his crew understand what's happening. A good commanding officer motivates those under him by making sure that they understand what they're fighting for. They understand what the consequences are. They understand why this is important. If you can do that and motivate the men under you and women under you, you have a chance of being successful. And when he does that here, it's good that we see people being concerned and unsure. And that's because he himself is being unsure. But also being honest about that. He says that those are the enemy out there. They're not. Everyone there is following orders. The question is, what is a legal order and what is an illegal order? Every military of any consequence has instructions about what kind of orders you should and should not follow. It's always a risk, because if you refuse to follow an order and it was properly given, then you're going to be court-martialed and probably shot. So it's a really difficult dance to dance. But as Sheridan says, our humanity got us into this, and our humanity is going to get us back out again. One of the hardest things in the world is for a guest actor to come in and have to deliver a ton of exposition and make it feel sincere and make it feel that there's real stakes involved. Or hamburgers. There's steaks or hamburgers, one or the other. And here we have just an example of that, where he is bringing in information that now she has to respond to in some way. And I think he does a very good job of effectively making her understand what's happening with the Grey Council, and really only she can stop this. It's not just about civil wars, all kinds of wars, and the cost and the consequence of that, and how things spin out of control. That there are those who are for a war, and those who are against it, and those who, like the Grey Council here, try to sort of thread the needle and say, well, there are no consequence to us. As we have now in Ukraine, where there are some people who, are in favor of helping Ukraine, and some people are against it, wrongly, by the way, and those who just don't want to get involved. I think that there are times when your character is tested and you must make a choice. So about General Haig being killed, Robert Foxworth was playing General Haig, and I brought this character in all this time specifically to crescendo his character in this episode. And when we called up to say, would you be in? His agent at first said yes. Then they called back and said he's been double booked on something else. And we asked, pray tell what? It was Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So strange thing has happened. General Haig died off camera. And the character had it coming. Foxworth is a lovely man. He did a great job. He's a good actor. He was, at least in terms of our experience with him. But I was crestfallen when he was not available for this, because it would have made all the, he would have been all there is. But then again, Bruce McGill came in to play this role for us. Did, I think, an amazing job of it. He has with him a gentleness and a vulnerability, but also he's able to bring the fire when he needs to. So I think in the long run, it ended up being a good thing for us, because honestly, I can't imagine anyone else now doing this part. This is where Mars gets bombed, women and children at risk, as it says here in the show. This reaches the point now when they're seeing illegal orders being given and being followed. I think that there's, emotional, as I mentioned before, an emotional point where you must take a stand. And the declaring martial law and bombing civilians, as we're seeing again in Ukraine right now, there is no grounds for that ever. And Sheridan knows that, and then the other staff members know that, and they know that there's almost no return from this. When Delenn says, you're not the same person you were when I came here, this is the kind of a nice, I wanted someone to acknowledge in the show that he had grown and changed. And he's not, in fact, the same person that he was. He is halfway through his arc to becoming a religious figure. And that remarkable transition, I thought, had to be mentioned by somebody. I like the use of color here, and the reddish light, not the bright white light. It really helps it to pop. Normally, this kind of episode would have gone to Mike Bayhour, who was our lucky charm. He always got the really big episodes, but David Eagle did a really terrific job on this. You see one of the monks there? They're still hanging around. And this is the moment. This is also, I think, the first time in a while we've popped actually into seeing the ISN newscast. Not from the camera point of view of the broadcast, but from the side. I think we set this up in what's normally the security area. That's where those monitors are. If you put Garibaldi's desk in front of that, you'll now be able to see the little correlation to the security area. Again, talking about where you can points of no return for all the characters. Here's a character who, again, seeing what has been transpiring, cannot look away anymore. As the reporter on the Russian TV news could not look away anymore and started saying, in essence, which you're being told a lot of lies. The actress in that scene, Maggie, did not really know that we'd be dropping stuff on and in front of her. So her reaction is actually fairly authentic when she was startled to see that. There's a technique that is used, I think it was first used by Hitchcock, where it's a zoom in and dolly out. So the camera is zooming in while the camera is moving back, and it creates this effect of sort of closing in the world. And when she says that the ships are on the way to seize Babylon 5, I said specifically in the script, I want this effect. It does happen a little bit too fast for me here. So we're pushing in, and all the other dialogue goes away. Zooming in, pushing out. And we just stay with him because this is the moment he realizes we can't go back. We have to deal with this. We're on our own. This is the breaking point. I would have liked to have done that push a little more slowly and played the voices more in the background. It just almost made them go away. Because what they're saying there is not that massively important. It's important to see the emotion of we are on our own now. Bruce does such a great job with this. You really feel the pain of his decision. You feel the reluctance of that. And the reactions of everyone else here in this scene, this is one of the most, I think, interesting dynamics we ever put to camera, of seeing all the thoughts that are racing through their heads at this particular moment. Bruce loved this because he always plays these straight up good guys who never change anything, and here was a time when he got to be something different. We got to be the rebel. The quietude of the character, let him talk and let him get to the point of the question he has to ask. Now we know the cost. This was such a fun episode, also a very serious episode being to write, because I needed to feel the urgency of all this. And the quietude of no shouting. If we lose, they'll probably kill us. And Sheridan is saying, again, just as quietly, you're probably right. Of course, Bob has to be the first to go. Garibaldi just digs it. He's on board. If there's a fight, I'm on board. And Stephen straightening his spine and saying, yeah. And he says, fight last. He was holding up. If even one person there in that group, and here we see the ships that are coming toward, even one person in that group had said no, he would have had to rethink what he's going to do. It had to be unanimous. Now we're going to see the strategy being put together on the Earth side. So again, we're starting to see how they're preparing defensively for the coming war, as well as later on seeing how they did it offensively as well. and having to prepare for massive amounts of wounded. The reason that Sheridan uses Duvall's equipment to make the announcement, but not to help out, he says this because, he wants to keep him sort of in his back pocket. But there's a larger part of this, which I'll get to in a moment. Whenever Mira comes on stage to do this confrontation with this guy, I cannot look away, because the intensity, the fire that's there in her performance is just riveting. When she talks to the council about turning their backs on innocents and letting them die, and being cowardly, and not doing what's necessary to save the lives of others, when she finished that scene, she came into my office and said, "So, how long were you in Yugoslavia?" Because that's kind of the same thing as she was enduring while she was an actor working in Yugoslavia. That was the debate among everyone else. Here again, I've never particularly liked the fact that those cowls are so opaque and you really can't see through them. But here it kind of works, because it reinforces that she's talking to people who, for the most part, aren't going to listen to her. They've closed their minds and closed their cloaks, and are not going to answer the call, with some of them anyway. It's such a hard thing for an actor to walk into a room where no one's responding to her and make that dynamic. All she's doing really is just saying the words without anyone dramatically to bounce off of, which is so hard for an actor to pull off. But she does it magnificently. The only part where she kind of broke character for a moment is when she breaks the staff, and the prop department had pre-cut it and put like a small dowel or something in there to keep it together, but they made it so tight that she couldn't break it. And by the third time she would do this, she was just laughing about it. And if you watch her face, there's a slight smile there. She fights, just as she breaks it and brings it down, you'll see a smile on her face, because she was trying hard not to laugh one more time. Because every time she managed to break it, she was laughing. But she finally got it that take, and there's a slight smile in the beginning, but then when she realizes she's broken it, okay, let's get serious, because we can't do this all night. And yes, the Minbari have been sort of keeping things quiet for a long time, but there's a certain point again where you have to sort of stop taking things quietly and do something about it. And those who are leaving are religious caste and worker caste, and the warriors are staying behind. But each caste has its own access to their own ships that were done to keep one caste from basically conquering the other two, so that they had access to ships. So there's Rance Howard, Ron Howard's dad. It's basically how much Ron now resembles his dad. It's you really see that the apple is still on the tree, as a matter of fact, it didn't fall from it. And they're both aware of the fact that there's something wrong, but they also can't address it directly. Sheridan can't say what he's planning to do, because there could always be someone listening in on this transmission. So he doesn't want to give anything away. But his dad was a former diplomat and has military training and understands coded messages, who can kind of read between the lines to know what's going on. So they're saying what they have to say without saying the reason why, which is kind of a fun writing exercise. Those of you at home who are aspiring writers, try writing a scene where the problem between the two characters, they never say out loud, but everything about the conversation is about that problem. And Brents is just so sympathetic here and so strong, and the belief that he has here in Sheridan. Bruce was very fond. Actually, the whole crew was very fond of Rance. They kept saying, the whole crew would say, "When are we bringing Rance back on the show? He did a really great job." Everyone liked him. Really nice guy. I talked to Ron about him a couple of times and just made sure he understood that we all liked him a great deal. A true professional. Even a scene like this that's just fairly short, there are all kinds of ways you could just call that in, but he didn't. He was present in every single syllable. And now Sheridan's expression goes from, okay, that was my dad, I said goodbye. And now, like Sinclair once said, he is the arrow loosed from the bow. There's no more time now for second thoughts. There's only time to do what needs to be done. We reused the Starfield relaunching shots a lot during the course of the show, but we flopped them here. We actually took the same shots and kind of reversed them so people wouldn't notice necessarily, to take some of the burden off of the CGI guys. So going back to Drawl, yes, he wanted to keep Drawl in his back pocket, but he also wanted to make sure it was a clean fight. In the French Revolution, what caused a lot of people to rise up was rumors that Prussian soldiers were being brought in to put down those who were rebelling, and that tipped it over the edge. And Lincoln was offered, troops to assist Northern troops during the Civil War, but he again said, no, it needs to be us. It had to be a clean fight. He knew this, that if aliens got involved and they were in the front lines, inside B5 security, fine, but in toe-to-toe with Earth ships, it had to be just Earth ships. Otherwise, it would always look like alien ships got involved and were somehow manipulating all this, which we saw in prior episodes where they say Sheridan has fallen prey to alien influence. That's the moment. B5 is seceding from the Earth Alliance. That's a point of no return, alluded to earlier. That's the breaking point. And he has to be honest with everyone around him to give them the opportunity to walk away, as I think one does in C&C. So many viewers were sure, even up to this moment, that somehow this is going to work out. That somehow, it wasn't going to happen. No, we promised you a big battle, and my gosh, we're going to get it. And we said, this is our fight, not his. That's what he's referring to. As I was writing the script, I almost kind of expanded upon that a little bit for the very reasons I mentioned a moment ago, but there was so much exposition to begin with in this scene. I thought, no, just say this is our fight, not his. That's all you need to worry about. I like that Ivanova, checks with Corwin to say, are you okay? Because he's had a nice arc of going from just a faceless, nameless tech in the course of the show to becoming a little more responsible for things. And it was nice to I wrote that to have her check with him. I also want to put everyone here at risk in one way or the other. And having Ivanova leading the battle outside and possibly, knowing she won't return, hence this look, was again a way of making the stakes outside as well as big as the stakes inside. To those who ask, why didn't we just shut down the gate? First off, it takes a long time to do that, but also, Earth destroyers are capable of making their own jump points. It wouldn't have stopped anything. This way, at least they knew where they'd be coming. And the silences, we look around for a while. I've gotten more in love with silences. I've gotten more mature as a writer. I think if I was working and write this episode now, it would probably have 20% less exposition. For me, this is where my heart starts to start pounding, seeing these two forces coming together. Still trying to negotiate, still trying to find a way out of this. And he's not wrong. He's saying these, again, going back to what I said earlier, these are illegal orders. You have to be able to understand that and not do what you're about to do. If he had managed to convince them, then they might not have left the alliance. And inch by inch. I'm a Cold War kid. I remember being a kid in the Cold War period and seeing movies where you would inch up further and further as the conflict got out of control to one bullet being fired, one ship being hit. All of a sudden, you're in it, and there's no way out now. And that's what we have here. I love all these ships coming in, and all it takes is one of them to open fire, and suddenly you're hot. I'm trying to remember, I think this is the first time we had the blast doors used in B5. We really couldn't lower them because we didn't have the budget or the way to do it. We could put it in as a plug, but we couldn't show it lowering. So we just heard it in the background, so we didn't see it. So now you can see how we began to create the symmetry of the battle, where the Earth Force ships are on one side, our forces are on the other, and everything has to match in the fluidity. Even when they're in a furball, there has to be a logic to it. We also begin to really show that these are not just ships banging each other. We have interceptors. We have chaff. We have people targeting weapon systems. I get caught up in this sometimes with watching it. And be very careful to tie the outside hit to the inside hit, so you can feel the give and take of this thing. The Earth Force ships that are on Sheridan's side are kind of coming in from the left. On the right-hand side are the ones coming in to try and take over Babylon 5, because they just left the jump gates. So it's jump gates here coming in. Our forces are on this side coming at them. The breaching pod would attach at the bottom of as you will, of the station, burn through, say, coming through the floor, but that would be like the outer hull. So once they've come through, then they'll be going up through the walls and then coming out the walls. That's why we have the differentiation there. Michael's being very sensible, trying to bottle up the incoming soldiers, because what they have to do is keep them away from CNC. Because if the incoming forces take command and control, they can have command and control of the entire station, and at that point the battle's over. They can turn the guns against their own ships. They can do whatever they want to do. So it's really important to stop them at all costs. And the fact that the Narns are willing to pay that cost, this is the part that for me feels like glory. When we have in the Civil War, the horrible thing about it was that we're using the same techniques and tactics they had used in the Revolutionary War, but muskets were far less accurate than guns in the Civil War. And as a consequence, lining everyone up in rows, close enough to see the other person's eyes practically, with guns that were a lot more accurate, is why so many people died in that war. It was just horrific, because the generals are fighting the next war the tactics of the previous war. I love the sense of the ships coming in and exploding into the front of the station, and the havoc is being caused by all this. It was important to me to really feel that this place is in danger. This place is coming apart at the seams. And to those who talk about ramming speed, it's not a cliche. Ramming speed means the maximum speed that the craft can give you, turning off all safeties that would normally cause you to divert course. It's making sure that nothing will interfere with you doing what you have to do. So when she sacrifices herself in this process, that there is no question that is actually a real thing. You'll notice in this sequence that when the ships eject, it's a front cockpit that separates from the rest on thrusters, and we got so close to the ship when that Star Fury explodes. Doing paint scrapers, which is what you call when you get right up against something, takes a lot of processing power. But we said we have to go close. We have to feel this battle taking place around us. But seeing CGI is all well and good, but you need to have the human aspect of this, of seeing soldiers and security guards fighting it out. So it's down below, it's command and control, it's the ships, it's the Star Furies, but it all has to make sense. It all has to seem logical in the progression of it. Now, my theory was that they assumed that Babylon 5 would just roll over, as we again saw recently somewhere else, and they only sent in, some of the ships that they thought they might need. They were holding back to see what would happen. But now that B5 has been softened up, here come the reinforcements. And the look on Bruce's face as he hears of more ships coming in and jump points forming above the station. You just see in his eyes, we're over, it's over, we're all going to be court-martialed, we're all going to die, we've lost the battle. And this is one of my favorite scenes of Mira ever. I think it's also one of the fan favorites as well, to see her come out, this push in, and she doesn't oversell it. That's the thing about it. She could have been really angry about it, but what she is just firm. She's firm and determined, and only one Earth cap has ever survived battle with the Minbari fleet before. He is behind me. You were in front of me. Be somewhere else. When I wrote that line, I literally shot a hand up in the air or a fist. Yeah, that's a good one. That I knew was going to be a line to get people up out of their seats. That's the thing that I'm not sure people always understand is everything that you're seeing here had to be written down in the script first. And I had to experience it with those characters and feel those things. And I remember for the first time writing that line down and thinking about it. That line could have gone a million different directions, but no, it came out that way. And when that happens, you're catching lightning in a bottle. I could have cut away before at the moment of triumph there, but I wanted to see again the human cost or the Narn cost. That war is not sanitary, war is not clean, war is not pretty pictures, war is people suffering, dying, bleeding out, the terrible cost of that. As you watch Jeff lowering, look at the hand, look at Jerry's right hand, the way that it waggles when he drops the helmet. He's holding the helmet up here because his arm is broken. And it's just kind of waving in the wind there. It's pretty horrific. And full points to Jerry for doing that scene. The great irony is, again, so many times things were in scripts ended up happening in real life. And a week or so after this, we're shooting the next episode. And next one after that, where Sparky the computer says, "What, you got a broken arm or something?" And I heard that Jerry wanted to see me and Doug Netter. Was really upset, and he said, "Look, I sit on the set. I had a broken arm, and I was there when you needed me to be there. And then you write this script, and you're making fun of my injury, and I don't like it." He was really white hot about it. And I said, Jerry, did you look at the date that's on the cover of that script? And he really hadn't. He just gotten it like that day. And it was written like a month before his injury. And he kind of had to sort of backpedal a little bit. But that sort of thing happened all the time on this show, where there were just weird synchronicities. Like as I mentioned before in an earlier commentary, Ivanova having the line about her having a great relationship with her right foot, and the day before we shoot the scene, Claudia breaking her right foot. So I promised that the cast would stop making reference to body parts being damaged. Yeah, like that Bruce can't put the uniform back on again, not until this has all been cleared up. And of course, he never does. Some things can't always be cleaned up and cleared up. I always wasn't sure about the sharp turn that Goose Bigelow makes there. Here, we shot this before he broke his arm, and we said his leg was hurt. In the next episode, we see him with a broken arm. So fortunately, he has his right arm in his pocket, right hand in his pocket, or he's just happy to see us. And we can sort of kind of buy that he wasn't sure how bad it was injured. So, but I almost wish I'd broken his arm in the script rather than leg, because it would have been absolutely spot on. But so we had to sort of change from his leg being injured to his arm. This is a very, very cute moment with Mira and Bruce. They come across so well with each other. And it's that moment when everyone, I think, is watching this is saying, kiss each other, for God's sake, kiss each other. And so he sort of does it and sort of, holds back a little bit. I started to say that I've never been sure about having Band-Aids. I think by the 21st century we'll have something better than those, kind of bandages. And here's a moment when, he kisses the hand, and that's the start of the actual relationship. So, because I did extend the moment after the battle is won to see the price, God, I can't just leave it there. I have to have some kind of a happy ending to this episode, even though there's an ominous poster behind them. On the one hand, I like the scene where they're all applauding. It starts with the golf clap and then goes wide. On the other hand, a part of me says, this is artificial. This is the writer looking for a happy ending, which is why I had the poster there to kind of take some of the saccharine nature off of it. But even to this day, I kind of go, maybe I should have found a different way to end that. Anyhow, that is the commentary on Severed Dreams, which is honestly, I think my favorite episode of the entire show, not counting Sleeping in Light. It's something that where everything came out exactly as intended. Thank you for being with us. I hope I was more intelligible this time than I have been in the past. And I will see you on the next commentary very soon. Stay out of trouble, and I will see you on the front lines. Good night.